So we're sending tanks. Flashback. Don't kid yourself. If we send tanks and airplanes, well, don't kid yourself. That's World War III. Okay, what's changed? I'd like to know what's changed. Have we had a debate on any of this? Are you for the $60 billion that we already sent over to Ukraine? Are you cool with that? Because I'm not cool with that. I haven't liked that from the beginning. Why are we doing it? Why are we doing it? There's no debate on the floor of the House and the Senate. We don't have that anymore. We don't do that anymore. So why aren't we debating the money? And then how come it was exposed last week? What was it? 10 executives from Ukraine, 10 different politicians had to resign because they've been funneling our money off. They're buying houses and vacations and sports cars. We all knew this. You knew it. I knew it. People who voted for Joe Biden, they know it. People who didn't vote for Joe Biden, they know it. Aren't we in this together as Americans? Because you're about to go into World War III. By the way, after Ukraine scored the U.S. tanks, now Zelensky yesterday said, great. We just need now some modern fighting jets from America, and we'd like missile systems. What? First of all, who the hell do you think you are? Second of all, are you out of your mind? Apparently, yes. And so are all of the world leaders. And I have a very big warning for you. Already, the New York Times is washing their hands for Joe Biden. It is Pontius Pilate. Read the story in the New York Times that is talking about the tanks. Oh, he's doing it reluctantly. Look, I wash my hands of this whole crucifixion thing. I see no wrong in this, man, but I will do what you want me to do. That's the way they are now presenting our tank deliveries. Joe Biden didn't want to do it, but Germany really forced him. No, excuse me. Our administration really wanted tanks there, but they wanted Germany to do it. And Germany, after we were pressuring them, said, we're not doing that by ourselves. You want us to do that? You send your tanks and we'll send our tanks, but we're not sending them by ourselves. Okay, Germany's pressuring us. We have to do it. Look out. Look out, America. Let me take you back to a place in history so you understand. If you are younger, you're not my age, you may not understand how things used to work and how they're supposed to work when you live in a democratic republic. December 8th, 1941. Franklin Roosevelt is wheeled into the Capitol, and then with braces on his legs, he struggles because he has polio, no power in his legs. He struggles to make it up to the podium. He grips that podium and he delivers one of the most famous speeches in the 20th century. December 7th, 1941, a date that will live in infamy. He then declares war on the government of Japan. Germany declares war on us. But why did he give that speech? To announce that we were going to war? He gave his speech so Congress could then vote on war. Now, it wasn't a long debate. It happened later in that day because we were attacked the day before Pearl Harbor happened. So the vote was nearly unanimous. There was only one vote against and one abstention. By the way, the vote against was from a communist in Vermont. I think it was Bernie Sanders, but I'm not sure. The speech was historic. But it is important today to look at that and understand the gravity of it. In the U.S., as per our Constitution, there's a process. We allegedly have a way we're supposed to do things like committing our military to war and spilling not those in Washington, not their blood. Hunter Biden is not going to the front lines. They are not even discussing the blood of our children, our treasure, our good name. FDR, that wasn't a photo op. He was asking Congress, democratically elected officials, to vote to give him the authority to go to war against Japan because that is the process. Well, you're not going to have a choice. You're not going to have a choice. It will be December 7th. That'll be the first time they actually discuss it in Congress, when we are hit with a massive cyber attack from Russia in response. Think of this. You're in the Soviet Union, and people are like, oh, we're not fighting a war against United States. Well, your response most likely would be, the hell we're not. They're sending them all of the missiles. They're sending them the technology. They're sending them the bullets. They're sending them now offensive weapons. This is not a defensive weapon. A tank is not a defensive weapon. It is an offensive weapon. And it even says in the Pontius Pilate is really a good guy article on this today, they even say this is for the offense that Zelensky is planning in the spring. I have to tell you, we're at war with Russia. We are at war. The Biden administration and the war hawks on both the right and the left have decided that we don't need to check with you. We don't need to vote on things. We don't need a consensus. They're just the stupid people. For those of us who grew up in the Cold War days, those who grew up in the Red Dawn 80s era, we only imagine tanks rolling across Europe against Russians, the Russian T-72s, and see U.S. F-16 fighting Falcons going against MiG-29s. We saw that because they were going to attack us, and then it quickly just went into nuclear war. For those of you who might have been wishing for that, well, your fairy godmother called Joe Biden just granted your wish. We are sending tanks, and we're now allowing several European countries to send F-16 fighter jets. Full stop. No joke, folks. The cream of the crop of U.S. weaponry is going straight up against the Russians on the ground and in the sky, and it will be war. But no vote, no debate. We don't get a say-so. Do you have a say-so on anything in your life? Did you have a say-so with this government? Do they actually work for the people? Is this a government of the people, by the people, and for the people? I got to tell you, no on all three counts. No on all three counts. You tell me what's going on. You tell me when you were consulted. TARP, it was an emergency. December 7th. It was an emergency. We had to deliver TARP. There was barely any discussion. We did it. We just did it. The money printing. By the way, with TARP, you were left out in the cold. The banks got everything. But then the Fed just went out of control on its own. A private corporation in bed. This is a private-public partnership. This is what it means. The Fed, a private corporation in bed with the government of the United States just starts printing money. Did you okay $7 trillion to go over to foreign countries between the crash of '08 and 2020? Did you okay that? Were you cool with all of this stuff? No, you didn't really have a choice. How about were you cool when they shut down your business but opened Home Depot? Were you cool with that? Were you cool with you must take this vaccine? Maybe you might have been, but are you still cool with it now that we know? And don't take it from Robert Kennedy. Take it from Bill Gates. The vaccine didn't work. And yet they're still trying to force you to do it. The masks don't work. Yet they're still trying to get you to wear a mask on an airplane. Did you know the administration was fighting for that? Was that a fight for you and what you wanted? Or was that a fight for what maybe they want? Do you hear anybody battling for voter ID? Nobody trusts anything anymore. Why? When you have about 80% of the American population, but that's all sides, 80% are for voter identification, but they're not passing that. Why? It ain't because they work for you, because if they did work for you, they had already passed it. Did they ask you when we left that billion-dollar airport and handed it to the Chinese? Did they ask you for permission? Were the American people for the way we left Afghanistan and gave our weapons, just gave them to the Taliban? Did they ask you about global warming? It ranks last in almost every poll on what people are concerned about. And yet they've elevated that to the most important thing. They even lied to you and said, no, this is an inflation project. This is an inflation bill to curb inflation. John Kerry out at the World Economic Forum said, we all know that was a global warming bill. That was generally a climate bill. They went behind your back. They knew you wouldn't be for that, so they changed the name, dressed it up. They lied to you. Do they represent you? When they couldn't get anybody else to do it, they couldn't get the government because of that sticky constitution, they just came up with ESG. And they're having their banking partners, you know, the ones they gave trillions of dollars to, of your money. Did they ask you if we should close down our exploration for gas and natural gas? Did they ask you about the bathrooms? Are you cool with what's happening with women's sports and CRT? Are you cool with what's being taught in our schools? When you stand up, they call you a terrorist. Let me ask you, who's in charge of this country? Because this is not a democratic republic. In a democratic republic, you ask for permission. And it may not be directly to the American people. It's to Congress. If you have a copy of the U.S. Constitution, get it. You have a copy of it, go find one if you don't. It's in a history book. Well, not a new history book, but it'll be in a history book. You got one hanging on your wall, look in your kids' homework. I'm sure there's something against it there. I doubt they'll print the whole thing, but there it is, black and white. It's crystal clear. We are not a monarchy, and we are not an oligarchy. We aren't a communist committee. I'm not sure if you're aware, but Russia is a nuclear power. They have the largest arsenal of nuclear weapons in the world, and Putin is running that country. And Putin is very, very Putin. Now, that's not a reason to run from someone. The question, can we defeat Putin in Russia? Yeah, we can. However, have you been reading? We have depleted our military. We don't have enough recruits. This would mean selective service. They can't staff the military. Why? Because they're doing things that you're against. I know this sounds old-fashioned, but you better get on the phone with your congressman, your senator, send an email, call them today. Don't send hate mail. Just write them and say, hey, what are we doing? I pay taxes. I help my frail neighbor cross the street. But I'd like to know why F-16s are shooting down Russian planes over Europe. I would like to know why we are sending tanks in, an offensive weapon. Do you want World War III? I will tie all of this together. And the questions you should be asking. But this is of critical importance. So why is this all happening? Why is this all happening? This is happening because we are so busy fighting Republican versus Democrat that we don't understand that the real fight is happening at a global scale. The real fight is collapse the West. Russia's trying to do it. China's trying to do it. Collapse the West. But we are also trying to do it because it's financially, it's inevitable. It's inevitable now. Okay, it's going to collapse. But what are the elites doing? They are putting together the framework of what it collapses into to protect them, not you, but to protect them. TARP. They knew a collapse was coming. So what was TARP? It was a framework so they could be caught, not you, but they would be safe. This is the same thing that is happening now. And they have the framework. Joe Biden just said 6 months or a year ago, we send tanks and airplanes. Make no mistake, folks, that's called World War III. And now we're sending tanks. And mark my words, next it will be missiles and airplanes. Why? What is the real plan here? Do they work for you? Because they haven't consulted us in a long time. Do they work for you? Are they really trying to preserve our freedoms? Or do they have a different plan?